Today, I want to talk about something that's been worrying me, and probably worrying you too. Given the headlines, the situation with Europe's largest nuclear power plant, the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant in Ukraine, which is now operating on emergency power. It's a tense, delicate moment, and I want to break it down for you. What's going on? What's at risk? Who's arguing what? And what it all might mean. Let's dive in. So, first, what's happening right now? Over the past several days, the Zaporizhzhia plant has been without external power, relying entirely on diesel backup generators to keep vital safety systems running. The external grid connection was severed. The last remaining high-voltage power line was damaged, reportedly from shelling or conflict-related destruction. This is now the longest outage the plant has faced since its occupation during the war. Experts and watchdogs are sounding alarms that operating on backup power for extended periods is dangerous. Why is this such a big deal? Because even nuclear plants that are shut down, or in a cold shutdown state, still generate residual heat in their cores and stored fuel assemblies. If cooling systems fail, that residual heat needs to be managed, or you risk overheating, damage, or worse. Running on diesel generators is supposed to be a last resort, a stopgap. But when those are stretched for days, you're flirting with the boundary of what's safe. Let me pause for a moment and say, I'm not here to panic you. But this is real, and we should treat it like the serious risk that it is. Let me walk you through some of the big risks and complicating factors. And then I'll share some thoughts on what might happen next and what the international community should be doing. You see, diesel generators aren't infinite. They require constant fuel supply, maintenance, and redundancy. In a war zone, supply lines are vulnerable, logistics are messy, and damage or disruption can happen. If one generator fails, backups need to pick up the load. If they all fail or run out of fuel, you're in deep trouble. Some reports say diesel reserves on site could last about 20 days. But that's under ideal conditions, not amid shelling or sabotage. Nuclear plants are typically built to handle outages of limited duration, maybe tens of hours, or in carefully tested scenarios. But to push them through extended outages, especially under conflict, is uncharted territory. In fact, European regulatory stress tests historically consider 72 hours of blackout as a benchmark. Beyond that, you're entering unknowns. Remember, this plant is in a conflict zone. The power line was damaged under circumstances likely tied to the war. Some analysts even argue that the blackout was engineered as part of a plan to force reconnection under Russian control. Satellite imagery and Greenpeace analysis suggest construction of a new 201-kilometer transmission line through occupied territory toward the plant, possibly to integrate it into Russia's grid. If that's what's happening, someone is setting the stage. Cooling systems need water, often from rivers or controlled sources. In this case, the plant uses water from nearby sources, and where those are disrupted or controlled, the risk is magnified. Greenpeace reports that a new water supply system has been built around the cooling ponds, possibly to give more control over water flows. Also, the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam in 2023 severely impacted water regimes in the region. So any additional manipulation or disruption of water supplies could push systems to their limits. The plant is under occupation. Ukrainian plant operators, in some cases, are still working there, but under duress, constraints, transfers, and oversight by Russian forces. When staff are tired, when oversight is blurred, when decisions are politically pressured, safety culture can erode. In a nuclear facility, that's a big red flag. Okay, so that's the landscape. But what are people saying? What are the positions being pushed? And where do I lean? Ukraine accuses Russia of intentionally cutting power lines as part of a plan to force the plant into dependency and then integrate it into Russia's grid. Russian-aligned operators say they have sufficient diesel, that operations continue, and that the disruption was caused by Ukrainian attacks on the grid. Greenpeace and nuclear safety voices warn that this is a deliberately escalated crisis, that Russia intends to eventually restart a reactor under its control, disregarding safety norms. The IAEA, while cautious, is sounding an alarm. They call the outage deeply concerning and emphasize that prolonged outages on backup are dangerous. Experts note that reactivating reactors in this environment, without stable power, cooling water, trust, and oversight, is almost unimaginable as safe operations. Personally, I believe that this outage was not accidental. In a conflict zone, in a place so strategically and symbolically important, just calling it random damage undercuts the stakes. The actions line up with a possible strategy: create a crisis, offer the solution, integration under Russian grid control, and use the plant as leverage. But that's a dangerous gamble. That said, I don't think we're on the brink of a meltdown, and yet there's no public evidence of radiation release or containment failure, but we are on the brink of pushing components and human systems beyond safe margins. One misstep, generator failure, sabotage, or miscommunication, and things could tip. Let me map out some scenarios. These are not predictions, but plausible paths. The best-case scenario is power is restored to the plant from the Ukrainian grid, or a repaired line, cooling and safety systems stabilize, and the plant continues under monitored, constrained conditions. It remains in cold shutdown. The crisis de-escalates, though trust damage remains. The second-best outcome is that power is restored partially, but backup generators remain heavily used. Russia tries to force reconnection to its grid. Officials push to restart one reactor under Russian control, but technical, safety, and oversight barriers stall full operations. And the worst-case scenario, which we don't want to happen, is a generator fails or runs out of fuel, cooling is compromised, or further attacks disrupt systems. A local overheating or partial meltdown occurs, perhaps contained but with radiation release risk. It becomes a full-blown nuclear crisis, not just a power crisis. The international community's role will be critical. Pressure, monitoring, demands for safe operations, inspections, condemnation of risky maneuvers. The nuclear situation is not an internal issue for Ukraine, but a crisis that can have its fallout beyond borders, because if Russia succeeds to blow apart or to coerce Ukraine to give concessions, it sets a precedent of using nuclear assets as geopolitical leverage or weapons in war is a terrifying escalation, and it undermines norms of nuclear neutrality, safety, and civilian protection. And lastly, it draws resources and attention away from other urgent human and humanitarian needs. To navigate safely through this catastrophic threat, the international community should push for the immediate and safe restoration of external power to the Zaporizhzhia plant under verified protocols, while ensuring unhindered access for the IAEA and other independent monitors. There must be transparent reporting on critical factors such as fuel reserves, generator status, water supply, and overall structural integrity, alongside firm commitments that reactors will not be restarted as bargaining chips in political negotiations. Strong statements and, if necessary, sanctions should follow any deliberate manipulation or endangerment of the facility. And ultimately, pressure must remain focused on returning full control of the plant to Ukraine under reliable safety guarantees. All right, I'll close with this. We are living in a moment where geopolitics, energy, and nuclear safety intersect in terrifying ways. The Zaporizhzhia plant is not just a headline. It's a test of whether we, globally, can enforce rules that protect human life even in wartime. The danger is real, the room for error is thin, and vigilance is essential.